So we're going to continue our work here on less obvious limits. So notice I have a limit here. I can't evaluate because 4 will make the denominator equal to 0 if I try to plug it in. So we want to somehow cancel out that x minus 4 so we can evaluate by substitution. And the complicating factor now is I have this square root. Okay, so we're going to do something somewhat familiar, is we're going to try to rationalize away our square roots. So we saw this when we were doing trig and pre-calc, right? We had square roots, especially in fractions, and we made moves to get rid of them so our fractions were a little bit nicer looking and easier to work with. We're going to do something similar here, although it's a little bit more complicated in this case because notice I have something being subtracted by this x, the square root of x. So I can't just multiply by square root of x because if I distribute it, I still end up with a 2 square root of x in my numerator, right? So I have to do something to get rid of that square root of x and also not have a 2 square root of x. So I'm going to use a fact that we already know, but I'm going to use it in a pretty clever way. So the fact that we know is this, right? If I take x plus a times x minus a, if I distribute, or you can draw a Punnett square if you want, but if I multiply these together, remember that middle term cancels out. So ax and then negative ax I get, those cancel. So what's left is x squared minus a squared. If you'd prefer to have a number in there, you could write x plus 2 times x minus 2, gives x squared minus 4. But this is the fact we're going to use. This is called the conjugate, or conjugate pairs. So the conjugate we're going to use here is we're going to multiply by the numerator, but with that opposite sign in the middle. So if it's square root of x minus 2, we're going to multiply times square root of x plus 2. And then whatever I do to the numerator, I have to do to the denominator. Okay, so notice now if I multiply this out, I'll show you this one so you don't have to do this in your work, but I want you to see how it looks. So notice if I multiply these together, square root of x times square root of x is x, and then negative 2 square root x, 2 square root x, negative 2 times positive 2 is negative 4. Okay, so these cancel out. So my limit is now equal to this limit. So what's left over on top? Well, x minus 4, right? X minus 4. And then on the bottom, x minus 4. And then square root of x plus 2. Okay, and that's still the limit as x approaches 4 of this whole thing. Now that should make us really happy, right? Because x minus 4 now cancels out, and I'm left with the limit as x approaches 4 of 1 over square root of x plus 2. And then that gives me 1 over square root of 4 plus 2. Square root of 4 is 2, so this ends up being 1 over 4. Okay? So that is another strategy we can try. And remember, our goal is still the same, is to get rid of whatever is on the denominator of the fraction that's causing us to not be able to substitute. Okay, so my conjugate pairs in this first example were square root of x plus 2, square root of x minus 2. So that's my conjugate pair for this one. In my next one, my conjugate pairs, well, notice my square root is now on the bottom. And even though it looks a little bit more complicated, the idea is the same. So square root of x plus 4 minus 3 times square root of x plus 4 plus 3. Well, that's going to give me x plus 4 minus 9. So I'm following the same pattern, so I drop my square root, and then I multiply negative 3 times 3 to get that. So that's the fact that I'm going to use to tackle this one. So we're going to do the same thing we did in the last lesson. I'm going to show you all the steps, and then I'll give you a second to write them down, and then I'll talk through them so you can follow along. Okay, so take a second to carefully copy down these steps here. Pause the video. Go ahead and unpause when you're finished. All right. So I started by multiplying by my conjugate of the term with the square root in it. Okay, and I did the same thing on top and bottom. And then I followed my same pattern. So notice I substituted on the bottom the result of multiplying by the conjugate. From there, I did 4 minus 9 is negative 5. And I was very pleased because I saw now I have an x minus 5 and an x minus 5 on top and bottom. And the x minus 5 on the bottom is what's keeping me from being able to evaluate by substitution. So I canceled those out. I left my top alone. And then from there, I just plugged in 5. So I got square root of 5 plus 4 plus 3. 5 plus 4 is 9, so the square root of 9 is 3. 3 plus 3 is 6. So that's my limit. So now we have a new tool in our toolbox. Okay, so our process now is going to be everything we've seen before plus check for an opportunity to rationalize by using the conjugate. Okay, and our goal remains the same. Write this in big letters or highlight it. Because often going through these big algebraic steps, we forget what our goal is. All we need to do is cancel out the term that's preventing us from plugging in the limit.